This message comes from Greenlight. Ready to start talking to your kids about financial literacy? Meet Greenlight, the debit card and money app that teaches kids and teens how to earn, save, spend wisely, and invest with your guardrails in place. With Greenlight, you can send money to kids quickly, set up chores, automate allowance, and keep an eye on your kids' spending with real-time notifications. Join millions of parents and kids building healthy financial habits together on Greenlight. Get started risk-free at greenlight.com/Wondery.
There's one thing that will forever change the way you sleep, and it's the softest 100% organic cotton sheets from Boll & Branch. You'll fall asleep faster, wrapped in the most luxurious comfort. You'll never sleep hot again. With sheets that feel breathable to sleep in, you'll experience the purest softness on night one and feel your sheets get even softer with every wash. Discover the difference with 15% off your first set of sheets at bollandbranch.com with code WONDERY15. Exclusions apply. See site for details.
Hyundai understands the countless challenges drivers face on today's roads. Distracted pedestrians, red light runners, and unexpected obstacles make safety more important than ever. With over 120 IIHS Top Safety Awards since 2006, Hyundai delivers industry-leading protection in every vehicle. The available blind spot view monitor shows you a real-time video feed of your blind spots, while the standard forward collision avoidance assist works like a vigilant co-pilot, ready to brake when you need it most. And when fatigue sets in, the standard driver attention warning system keeps tabs on your focus, ensuring you stay alert when it matters. Because at Hyundai, your safety isn't just a feature, it's their first priority. Learn more about Hyundai at HyundaiUSA.com. Call 562-314-4603 for complete details. Hyundai vehicles have won over 120 IIHS Top Safety Awards from 2006 to 2024 as of December 2024.
Well, there's a lot of places that you can, like I said, do DNA testing, and there's a lot of places that you can do, cool tech building. We have a huge AI team. We do a lot of machine learning research and everything else. And I mean, you can go work at Facebook and do research, and you can go work at, OpenAI or any of these companies doing all sorts of cool things. But what draws people to our team and what we look for in recruiting people is people that are interested in creating a seismic shift in how criminal justice works, and doing that like now, not in the next decade or a few decades from now. And that passion is usually triggered by a personal event or someone you know has not received justice. Somewhere along your life, you may have come to realize that people don't always get the answers. The cases don't resolve in 1 hour like they do on the CSI shows, and you want to change that. And frankly, the people here are very impatient. I'm the chief impatient officer at the company, and are unwilling to compromise and accept that there's just not going to be an answer.
That's David Mittelman, the co-founder of Othram Labs, the forensic science firm that's been credited with revolutionizing the use of DNA in criminal, missing persons, and unidentified persons investigations. This is the Silver Linings Handbook podcast. I'm Jason Blair. David Mittelman is a geneticist, a professor, and an entrepreneur who's been working in the world of DNA for more than 20 years. David was a child prodigy, having begun work on the first human genome project at the University of Texas Southwestern Medical School at the age of 15. David went on to take part in an international effort designed to catalog the human genome and genetic variations. That project helped create the standards used by the Food and Drug Administration for gene sequencing in medicine. In 2018, David and his wife Kristen, another scientist, founded the firm Othram, which they named for the walls that protect the Minas Tirith in the book The Lord of the Rings. The idea was that by developing the most advanced DNA technology they could change the way that DNA is used in forensics. They succeeded. DNA's use in forensics, as opposed to medicine, is complicated by the fact that unlike a hospital or a doctor's office, DNA collected at a crime scene is often complicated, contaminated, incomplete, and mixed with other DNA. DNA in forensics is also complicated by the fact that unlike medicine, where you know the source of the DNA, the source when it comes to crime, a missing person's case, or an unidentified person's case, is often from an unknown subject. Instead of what the DNA means for the patient, you're attempting to solve for the opposite, who the DNA belongs to. In order to solve this challenge, Othram decided to focus on techniques for DNA extraction and ways to use tools like genetic genealogy to build more robust profiles that did not use the limited number of markers used in medicine and forensics at the time. Othram's ability to pull things like touch DNA, usable DNA from things as varied as mixed samples to sewage, and to use genetic genealogy in ways that many law enforcement agencies do not realize is possible, has led to a transformation in the private forensics space as well as within government agencies. David joined me for this conversation at our recent true crime meetup in Minneapolis, where we discuss, among other things, the dramatic transformation that's occurred and what else needs to occur to improve DNA laboratory work, the need for federal funding to help improve the capabilities of state and federal forensic laboratories, and the need to educate the public and law enforcement about what's possible. Just as a way of an intro, because I've heard David's humble. So I had the opportunity, I was lucky enough, through Brett Nallis at the Prosecutors Podcast, introduced me to Kristen Mittelman, David's wife, and another scientist. And I was lucky enough to have the opportunity to interview her twice on some of the advances around DNA technology. Othram, as you probably know, has been involved in some of the most high-profile, or not most high-profile, many high-profile cases that I'll let David talk about it, but that many people thought were unsolvable, both in the sense that law enforcement was unable to detect DNA, was unable to really cultivate it, and then also unable to use genetic genealogy to approach it. And David was one of the key members of the Human Genome Project, and Othram has brought a new approach to using forensic DNA. And one of the neat things for me on a personal level is that a number of my guests or people who have reached out to me with information about cases or where law enforcement thought that there was no opportunity to do genetic genealogy, I've been able to connect them with Othram, and there's potential progress on at least one of those cases. I won't say which one, but I have this guest coming on about it not too long. So, one of Othram's tags is really about revolutionizing forensic science, and I think they've truly done it, and a lot of folks have joined them and taking similar approaches. But one of the most powerful things Kristen said to me, which, for business people, this is the opposite of what you'd say, that one of her goals is someday every state lab has the same power to do what Othram is doing now without an Othram. So I really view them as a company that's dedicated to the mission. Now David can correct what I'm saying, but David, I just wanted to ask you real quick about your background in science, because to some extent, I think, people who do the work that you do could probably find millions of other ways to make millions of dollars. So I'm curious about why you decided to head toward forensic science.
Well, I think that there are a lot of ways to use technology to do good for society. Certainly in DNA testing, this has been true in medicine and diagnostics and a whole bunch of other areas, even consumer testing, helping people connect their families back together and find relatives. And one area where there's tremendous need, which is criminal justice, is at the same time the one area where a lot of this technology hasn't been deployed. And so, Kristen, myself, the team of us, we thought it was very important to apply this technology here. And in general, we like to look for opportunities to make big impact, do good in the world, and do that in areas where others are not really operating in. And so forensics and really a lot of the pieces of criminal justice, they've for many years kind of suffered in that they get kind of the leftover tidbits and the hand-me-down technological pieces of other industries. And we thought it'd be really awesome to come build a company that purpose-built everything they did just for criminal justice. And so we focus on this exclusively. We don't work in medicine or other adjacent industries. Whether or not the technology would be applicable doesn't matter. We put all of our energy on optimizing every part of what we do to build a better criminal justice system.
So, one of the things that I was just sort of curious about is, just thinking about the way that DNA was approached in forensics before, before companies like Othram really got into the mix. I know that we used in forensics things very similar to sort of medical assays to do DNA testing, and then also, in the early stages of investigative genetic genealogy. Could you talk to us a little bit about some of the limitations to that and some of the advances that have happened?
Well, there's lots of ways to do DNA testing, but there aren't a lot of ways to do DNA testing in forensics. The kind of material that you have available to you in forensics in these law enforcement investigations, it's very little DNA. The quality is not that great. There could be mixtures of multiple people in that DNA. DNA could have bacteria and other environmental contaminants. Sometimes the DNA is damaged. There's been chemical treatments. And so what works in other industries, like in medicine, where you're giving someone, a cheek swab or drawing blood at the doctor's office, what works there isn't going to work in forensics. And so a lot of that early failure and a lot of that, speculation that this can't be done or, it wouldn't work very well, really just comes from trying to take tools that weren't really intended for one area and just bring them in. And that's why I told you, I think a lot of these things are possible. All this stuff that people were saying was a science fiction is now science fact. There are countless cases we could go through. The barrier was taking the technology and designing something that worked specifically for the kind of DNA you'd experience when doing a law enforcement investigation.
Yeah, one of the really wild ones that Kristen had brought up to me was the septic tank, the DNA that you were able to pull out of the septic. Was it a septic tank, or am I wrong there?
It was, yeah.
Yeah.
The guy's name was Gordon Sanderson, but he was known for a long time as Septic Tank Sam. And about 40 years ago, his remains were found. He had been tortured and mutilated, and then his remains were found in this tank, and obviously completely unidentifiable.
I know one of the things that has come up, and part of our focus today is on indigenous people, and I think the same thing probably applies to African Americans, and the same thing probably applies to people who are Hispanic. I remember growing up and hearing about things like the Tuskegee experiments and other examples where the U.S. government did testing on African Americans, and there's just generally a reluctance, I think, with the African American community to share DNA, even with places like 23andMe or Ancestry. And I hear similar things in the indigenous community. And I know that for some, that has been a limitation in forensic genetic genealogy. And one of the neat things for me to watch, and I'm not even sure how you guys do it, is that Othram has been able to contribute to solving some cases that many people in law enforcement, because of ethnicity and genetic genealogy, didn't think were solvable. Could you talk a little bit to us about the genetic genealogy side and how you've been able to make progress in those areas?
Yeah, well, and so I'll talk about a few things because you packed a lot into that question. So there is a concern and a reluctance for communities that have historically been underrepresented and mistreated by the U.S. government to participate in these kinds of projects, and the reluctance is completely justified. There's a lot of concern about how the data will be used, and what control they will have over this data. So I'll start off by saying is something important that needs to be discussed openly. And it's, again, one of the reasons why when we built Othram, we wanted to really limit the scope of what we do. We didn't want people to think, come help us solve a cold case, and then, we're going to go do some medical things too.
We're going to do medical research on it.
That's right. So
Right.
I think there are a lot of good companies doing great medical research, and there's a lot of great companies doing good diagnostics, and there are countless companies that can help you find your roots, as I say, and your relatives. And we wanted to really focus the work that we do on helping, kind of tie the loose ends up in these investigations that are frankly very taxing and very, very harmful for families. We talked about Gordon Sanderson from the septic tank. His sister's still alive, and he was a victim of the 60s scoop in Canada, where they had taken indigenous kids and adopted them out to white families, and she was separated from her brother and never knew what happened to him. And so that's a pain and a damage that she carries for decades. And identifying him was really important to her. So I think that these issues are real and should be discussed. There should be guardrails for how the work is done. And I think everyone should evaluate how and where they contribute their DNA profiles and their support. And so you should get to know the folks that are doing the work and pick the companies and the practitioners that you trust and that you think are aligned in mission. So that's the first thing I'll say. The second thing is, to your point about kind of the difficulty of working genealogy, say for folks that aren't Northern European, or some people just say white, but really it's Northern Europeans that are overrepresented in the genetic genealogy databases. What I would tell you there is that, of course, it's easier when you're more represented in a database to identify people that are related to you. But I believe the problem is overstated. And in fact, from inception, we've had success identifying folks from all sorts of backgrounds and historical origins. In the reality, our world is very admixed in the sense that people have crossed geographic borders and met one another and started families, and so it's a lot easier than I think people think to bring value to everyone and not just one slice of humanity. And we actually work really hard to push the boundaries there. For those that are familiar with the National Institute of Justice, they fund research into how to make justice better. And we have a research grant with them. The title of the grant is The Effectiveness of Forensic Genetic Genealogy Techniques for Black, Indigenous, and Persons of Color. And so we literally are funded by the US government to figure out how to make sure the work we do is inclusive of everyone and not just the easiest cases. So that's something that we take to heart. And then again, we work really hard to educate, advocate, and push for the informed consent of folks to come join our database and really any database they feel comfortable joining. The last thing I'll tell you is that when you work with populations, for example, that are less represented, it's not just that you need more folks in the database, you need better DNA profiles. And so, people can cut corners when someone's well represented in a database and only look at some of the data or build a simpler profile. And what we've done, again, from day one is we've built the right profile. We call it the best case scenario. We look for the profile that is going to work every time and not some of the time. And refusing to compromise on that early step is really important. You may hear that there's a lot of ways to do DNA testing, but like I told you, there aren't a lot of ways to do it in forensics. And you might hear that there's a lot of labs or companies that claim they have labs that can do DNA testing in forensics, but there really aren't. And if it's done wrong, then you're going to disproportionately harm the folks that are either less represented in the database or the folks for which the evidence available, like in the septic tank SAM case, is just really suboptimal. So it's really important to have the best technology, the best relationship with the public, and then put all that together. And it goes back to what I was saying originally, purpose-built tools is how you're going to get this done. And this is probably moving a little beyond the question you asked, but where do we see genetic genealogy going? We're even trying to build tools to help semi-automate that process so that, again, even for the tougher cases, we can still get through them and not be burdened on by tremendous manual labor. I want every case to get, the right resolution, and I want everyone to get the answers. And so we work very hard to make sure this works, like I said, for everyone, not just someone.
And that idea of getting the right profile. And I'm probably going to get this wrong, but my understanding is that in databases like the FBI's CODIS database or other database, they look at a lot fewer markers than you all are able to. Is that an accurate description? And is that the idea you're getting at? Like, can we build the right profile, large enough or better profile? Or just tell me what you mean by the right profile.
Yeah. So my definition of a usable profile is a DNA profile that can show you all the distant relationships that connect someone to someone. Because if you want to do genealogy, yes, genealogy can find distant relatives, but that's contingent having a profile that can reveal those relationships. And so you're correct. The conventional system that's used by the FBI, it's called a CODIS, and it uses a method called STR testing that has like 20 markers. The kind of work that we do has hundreds of thousands of markers. But even within the realm of people that are claiming to do forensic genetic genealogy and everything else, there is variability in how they build those markers. And so there's two things that you need if you want to really make sure you can help everyone. And I mean everyone, even people that don't have good matches, even people that come from endogamous populations. If you want to help everyone, you have two ingredients. The first one is you need a lot of information. You need a lot of markers, like 500,000 markers. The second thing you need is you need the correct markers, and even a little bit of error can create a lot of false negatives, basically situations where you can't see the relationship. So it's possible, for example, that you and I might be related, but if I make enough mistakes in my DNA profile, you won't see the relationship. Not seeing the relationship can be fatal for genetic genealogy. You don't know which matches you'll need to tie the tree together. And you don't want to be in a situation where you're one or two matches short, and now the case looks very hard, or even worse yet, impossible to solve.
So I remember when I was interviewing Kristen, it was kind of wild. It was during the hurricane you guys were experiencing. She still came in the office to do the interview. But one of the things that I had asked her about, I had seen her during another interview, and a bell rang. She heard a bell ringing. And she had mentioned to me that that's the moment where there's some kind of advance or success in a case. And it struck me that you guys are really mission oriented, really, want to have impact on the victims' families and identify people. I was just curious about what kind of people gravitate toward Othram as opposed to other types of places.
Well, there's a lot of places that you can, like I said, do DNA testing, and there's a lot of places that you can do, cool tech building. We have a huge AI team. We do a lot of machine learning research and everything else. And I mean, you can go work at Facebook and do research, and you can go work at, OpenAI or any of these companies doing all sorts of cool things. But what draws people to our team and what we look for in recruiting people is people that are interested in creating a seismic shift in how criminal justice works, and doing that like now, not in the next decade or a few decades from now. And that passion is usually triggered by a personal event or someone has not received justice. Somewhere along your life, you may have come to realize that people don't always get the answers. The cases don't resolve in 1 hour like they do on the CSI shows. And you want to change that. And frankly, the people here are very impatient. I'm the chief impatient officer at the company, and are unwilling to compromise and accept that there's just not going to be an answer. The idea that you could run a test at a crime scene and not get an answer is unacceptable to us. And so we iterate endlessly, not just on providing service to law enforcement, but again, we've got a massive research team. We have two laboratories at Othram, a forensic lab that provides a service, and then a research lab. And then we've got a software team that supports, working cases. And then we've got this like AI machine learning, kind of research lab where we look to see what we can do to push the limits and get more done. So we recruit people that have that kind of mission, that impatience, and that unwillingness to accept what people say is kind of the boundaries of what can be done.
That's very cool. Raul Montero, who's in the room right now, he is, I'll say, a leading advocate related to the Long Island serial killer case, has also published some neat things. And one of the things that he's built is a giant map, a visualization of missing and murdered people, or unidentified and murdered people across the country. And I know in the Long Island serial killer case, without being particularly specific, a number of labs were involved in it, and I know Raoul's has been really impressed by Othram. So I want to hand him the mic for a second. I'm not sure if it's going to be a question, David, or a giant statement about how much he loves you guys. So,
hi, David. It's an honor to meet you. I think we've spoken a few times, whether Facebook or Twitter. I know that for me, the opportunity / burden of maintaining a map that has 19,000 unidentified persons on it can be daunting. And one of the bright moments, whenever they happen, typically on a Tuesday, is when I get a message from Othram of another solve. And I go to my map, I take that case, and the first thing I do is I put identified on that. And my statement is to say thank you for that, because I now have more identified markers on the map than I ever had before. And the impact that Othram has provided to families, to advocates, and to researchers has been invaluable, in my opinion. And I just wanted to personally thank Othram and you for that. And I hope, and I think I've said this to you on Twitter, I hope that one day my map is utterly irrelevant and just is becoming the identified map of previously unidentified. So thank you for that. That's my statement. But I do have a question. I would like to know where you see federally funded programs for technology to not only, I don't want to say streamline, but become more broad as an expectation. For example, the Carla Walker Act. If you could speak to that for a moment.
Sure. And I want to thank you for the map that you build, because, I don't think people understand the magnitude of the problem. You see on the news, so-and-so went missing or is unidentified, and it feels like a very isolated incident. And maps like yours demonstrate that, in fact, this is a substantial problem. We live in a modern society where there's like Wi-Fi on every street corner, and there's tens of thousands of people that aren't identified. It makes no sense at all. So your map is instrumental in helping people understand that there is a problem, and frankly, in helping people on the Hill at the federal level understand that there's a problem, because the first thing they ask is, oh, is that a problem? Right? Nobody wants unidentified people, but not many know that there are so many unidentified people. The answer to your question is that, when CODIS, and this is that standard FBI system, when CODIS was nationalized in 1994, you can look at history to see what needs to happen. The technology to power CODIS was built in the late 80s, and they spent 4 or 5 years vetting it, showing that it works, solving cases. And, more than 5 years later, finally, the federal government said, you know what? I think there's something to this CODIS system. Let's go nationalize it. And that's what the Congressional Act in 1994 did, is it basically made it a national program. And they put about $2 billion into upgrading, not even solving the cases, just upgrading the public labs to make sure they can take advantage of this really great technology. So it's not like CODIS just kind of ended up on everyone's doorstep. It was a very aggressive push from the scientific community to demonstrate that it works, legislative effort to then nationalize and demand it, and then resource it, because there's a lot of labs. There's a couple hundred public labs here in the country that need to get upgraded with the latest equipment and trained. And so The answer here is going to be the same. There's technology that can do things no one thought was possible. And even a few years ago, I think people were wondering perhaps forensic genetic genealogy was a passing fad, and each case is a happy accident. But in reality, you can see, if you look at our map on Othram.com, we've got a hexagon grid. I encourage you guys to look at it. It's a never-ending, sprawling landscape of success, and I think it's pushing the conversation now from incidental success to this could work for everyone, and that's what's now triggering legislation at the federal level. The Carla Walker Act is the first of many federal legislative pieces that will allocate actual resources to upgrade laboratories, to give resources to law enforcement so they can actually utilize the technique, and then most importantly, to collect the metrics and the data to know what's working and what's not working. Right? If you're taking $1 from the federal government, it doesn't seem unreasonable to report back, what was done with that dollar, what worked and what didn't work. And it's okay if it doesn't work, but you want to report that back so the next guy doesn't do the same thing and also not get something to work. So that's what the Carla Walker Act is. It's just game changing. Much like the technology that we built that is purpose built for forensics, this is really the first piece of legislation that's purpose built for forensic genetic genealogy. People here may not know that right now, a lot of the funding for forensic genetic genealogy comes off the leftovers of other grant opportunities that aren't really designed specifically for this technique. Federal leadership is important. It's critical, but it's not in itself sufficient. We'll need leadership at the state level, at the local level. And as more of these tools are deployed and as more people see success, we're hoping that the technology can be deployed to everyone, and everyone will include this in their budgets. There are budgets for, license plate reader cameras. There's budgets for, tools that can help you understand cell phone data to triangulate where someone was. And this DNA data is a very powerful way and a very simple way and also a very cheap way to figure out what happened at a crime scene, and rather who was there at a crime scene. So I think in the near future, you'll see legislation followed up by, data collection, people using the technique. And then I expect continued legislation at the federal and at the state level to make sure everyone can take advantage of this technique. And everybody in this room and everyone everywhere, that's following along. If you think this is the direction it needs to go, all of you should be writing to your local legislative folks, representatives, senators, and telling them, I really think forensic genetic genealogy, it's ready. It's ready to be utilized for everyone's family and not just the ones that, get the true crime special on Netflix. So if you guys feel like it's ready, politicians always respond most to advocates and people that actually have a need. Write to them, email them, bug them on Twitter, and let's get the word out.
Cool.
That's fantastic. And you absolutely jumped my next question, which was what could the public do? So for myself as an advocate, in other cases for other families, for other events, an email campaign is so critical and so beneficial. So you can certainly see the Catch List Twitter thing coming up with an email campaign relatively quickly to support the Carla Walker Act, to support Othram, and to really support all of the unknown families of, who are missing their loved one and they're an unidentified, already on record, just waiting to get their name. So thank you for that.
Yeah, no, and again, we really deeply appreciate all of you. I can build the greatest technology you've ever seen, and it's hiding in our laboratory, and it can't be shared with the world until there is demand for it, till there's legislative vehicles, until the public understands and helps set up the guardrails for it. So our technology is worthless without public support and the drive to get it out there in the world. And so we're very grateful to all of you. And frankly, if there's anything we can do, we know a lot about DNA, but we're not experts on social outreach and all that stuff. So if there's anything that we can do to support, we're always around. Otherwise, we're just hoping that the word gets out one way or the other, and everyone can take advantage of this really great technology.
Yeah, thank you. And that seems like there's a job posting at Othram waiting for me with that part. Thank you.
So I wanted to see if anybody in the room or anybody in the chat, I'm looking down into the chat right now, lots of positive feedback in there, both about you, Rahul, and also David, the work you're doing. Does anybody in the room have any questions you want to ask about DNA technology? And if you don't want to pick up the mic, I can ask your question for you. Okay.
Personalized, but I teach computer science at a local college. And I was wondering, David, if you guys ever did collaborations with, in terms of research with universities and colleges.
Yeah, we do a lot of research. If you you can go check out PubMed or wherever you look at academic literature. We've had 4 peer-reviewed papers out this year. We're trying to put Othram on the tenure track. And so we publish all the time. Everything we do is published in open access journals, peer reviewed, and we love new collaborations. We published the largest study that's ever been done, examining whole genome sequencing as an alternative to anthropology for measuring biogeographical origins. We did that in collaboration with RTI, which manages the NamUs project. So we're of course always very interested. And if you reach out to us, we're always looking for new ways to collaborate to build better technology.
Great, thank you.
I love that. I love that question. In journalism, one of the things that we do is a lot of the graduate school programs, but it's even happened in high school programs. They'll go in and investigate a case. It could be anything from a wrongful conviction to something else that happened, and they will collaborate on it. And I would love to see the day that companies like Othram could even collaborate with high school or college students to look into things, or to teach them in a real world situation, investigative genetic genealogy. So David, add that to your list of ideas for me. I think it could be an awesome way to collaborate, unless you're already doing it.
Well, we work with Southeast Missouri State University. We've done that for a couple of years, have knocked out a bunch of cases in in Missouri. And that's actually led to a massive project now. We've got a massive undertaking to eliminate unidentified remains in Missouri. Humber College, which is the largest educational provider in Canada, has been in a multi-year collaboration with us. And we actually teach kind of virtual courses with them. And we're also collaborating on scientific projects. If you look them up, they just did a press release. They got funding for a cool project to see how they could measure and improve metrics for policing as it pertains to forensic genetic genealogy. So we're doing it, but as is the spirit at Othram, is never enough. So we want to do more, and we're always open to academic collaborations with everyone.
Any other questions from the room?
Yeah, I've got.
Okay.
Hey, David, I'm Robert. Within individuals, say a missing persons, how can an individual say, me as a family member, if I think someone is a missing person that's been unidentified and the local police department, they're not doing anything with it, they're not going to do any genetic testing, how can I as an individual get you involved? Does that make sense? Does that question make sense?
It makes perfect sense. There's kind of a 3-step process that I would follow. I'd always go to the local agency first, see what you can do. Number 2, I think it's important to reach out to NamUs. NamUs at the federal level works to assist all these agencies, and they'll have a lot more ideas and tools to help kind of move a case forward. And then if you are also interested in doing more than just the local agency and NamUs, you can reach out to us. We have an email, solve, SOLVE, at othram.com, and you can report any of these tips or connections. I would say if you do reach out to us, and I encourage everyone to reach out to us, also reach out to NamUs and the local agency. It may seem like they don't get the message, but often they do, and it just takes them a minute to get to it. And so I say, why not contact all 3 options? And then if there's anything we could do to help get your case moved along, we will. If we identify that there's a funding limitation or something else, we crowdfund cases, we have private donors, we've got foundations that support us. So if there's a way that we can eliminate the barrier and get that case worked, we will do that for you. But that's kind of the 3-step process I would follow.
And I have an awesome example of that recently. Julia Cali, who will be coming on from the FBI, her first case as a profiler was a case out in San Francisco that remains unsolved. And Julia and the victim's sister have been in touch with law enforcement for years. And recently, the victim's sister reached out to the San Francisco Police Department and said, hey, there's this great new technology that exists that you may want to use to do genetic genealogy. And at first they came back to her and said, we've exhausted all leads. We've done all the DNA testing. We're never going to get anywhere. And so we sent them an episode where Julia asked a great question. She was in the audience. An episode with Kristen, and they listened to the episode with Kristen. And so this is the cold case unit for the San Francisco PD. And they were like, holy crap, we didn't even know this could be done and done this way. And so it actually made change and progress in their thinking about what was possible. So David, I want to thank you guys, and I really appreciate you coming on and coming by and the work that you're doing. And, hopefully we'll all find opportunities to collaborate with you.
Sure. Yeah. And thanks for having me. And if anyone has any additional questions, that email solve, SOLVE, at Othram.com. Feel free to pass case information, or if you just have questions that you don't want to ask publicly, but you've always been curious about something, we're always happy to chat about any topic.
Very cool. Thanks, David. We will see you soon, and take care. If you'd like to join us for more discussions with me and other listeners, we can be found on most social media platforms, including a listener-run Facebook group called the Silver Linings Fireside Chat. If you're a true crime fan, check out the new Substack I've created with Brett and Alice of the Prosecutors Podcast called the True Crime Times, where we highlight information on current cases, briefs on legal issues of interest, and highlight ethical true crime creators. For deeper conversations with any of our guests and live conversations with other listeners, and to support the podcast, you can also join us on our Patreon at www.patreon.com/The Silver Linings Handbook. I'm Jason Blair, and this is the Silver Linings Handbook podcast. We'll see you guys all again soon.